Welcome back, everyone. Let me know if you can hear me. Thumbs up. Perfect. Wow, what an amazing conference. We have cried, we have laughed, we have danced, and we just are so grateful and thankful for honoring us with your presence. And thank you to all the guest speakers, the presenters. It has been a time of learning and just a great environment, a great space to share these special topics. This is a perfect timing. This pandemic has been filled with many emotions, has been a roller coaster. Like Giselle says, we're all in this together. And it is, like I said, the perfect time to listen, to talk about this, to start a discussion, and to take action. And with that being said, we will start the last section of this conference. And it is such a great honor for me to present to you our last speaker, Ms. Kenya Burton. I'll tell you why I'm so excited, because really quick, I was her youth mentor when she was in middle school, and I am just so enchanted, and I am just so proud of who she has become and what an amazing leader as she is in our community. We are from Salinas, Salinas, California, representing right here. So we are just so excited. And so Miss Kenya Burton is an award-winning poet and youth poet laureate for Salinas, California. She is an awardee of the New York Silver Key in Writing and NEA Big Read Award, and an activist from Salinas. Through her work, she tackles difficult themes around racism, classism, sexism, and the other isms that plague America. She hopes to promote understanding and equality for the next generation. And Miss Kenya Burton, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. It really does mean a lot to be able to be in spaces like this, especially as a young person who's also in college. I think it's really important to have these conversations, and it's the reason why I've been in activism for so long. So I'm just happy to be invited and have this space. And so, yeah, my name is Kenya Burton. I always tell people Kenya like the country. It's the easiest way to say it because a lot of people get a bit confused. So a lot of people are like, with a name like that, usually with my voice with it, they have a better understanding. I'm born and raised in Salinas, California. I was recently picked as the Salinas Youth Poet Laureate, which was incredible, especially coming from such an extensive background where I have been involved in my community, not only as an activist, but also as a poet. And so a lot of my things go hand in hand. So it's very interesting to see how things sort of progressed in a way that I never thought it could, because I did start competing in middle school when I was part of Young Life, and Mary was a part of it as well. And so it's kind of gone full circle, which is incredible to see, because God has put me in paths where you do meet people again in incredible ways. So I'm very grateful that I have this space where I can share my story, especially as a young person. It's monumental to see that even if you are young, you can make a difference. And that's the biggest thing, that we are allowed to have a seat at the table and voice the things that we want to talk about. And so to begin, I would love to share my piece for George Floyd, which is a piece that I created after his passing. And it is something that I was able to travel and speak to a lot of people about, and just experience the mass mourning that the Black community faced. And especially I'm Black and Mexican, so that's always been a huge part of my identity, as we don't usually get a break. It's either we are seeing what's going on in the ICE detention centers, or we're seeing what's happening to our Black and brown men and women. And so I'm in that gray area where it's like we get both. So this was a piece dedicated to George Floyd and every other Black and brown child that has been taken. So this is called For George. Help me. I can't breathe. He's going to kill me. Trigger finger counterfeit bill telling the officer he can't breathe 15 times, one time too many, taking another Black man's life. 8 at night, 8 minutes of pleading, a 2-minute video, one body to be buried, a cop with his hands in his pockets and a smirk on his lips, pointing like Columbus finding land that did not belong to him, and you still proclaim his innocence. You will move on to the next story while we scrape our men off of the streets. You let a guilty man go while we pick out a casket. You give him bodyguards to protect him while we choose his pallbearers. We are being gunned down like dogs, and they still have the audacity to say that racism doesn't exist. Say that the system wasn't built from the bodies of our sisters and brothers. Say I'm angry. Say I'm vicious. Say that I am an animal, so it makes it okay to kill me. They use our deaths to teach us lessons. Don't talk back. Don't fight back. Hope that they get off of you before you take your last breath. You have a bulletproof vest and still our phones prove no protection. We could catch our murder live and you would still call it fabricated. Understand that your story will never be just yours. Your movement will become theirs. Turn our Black Lives Matter into All Lives Matter, because when the topic's not on them, they feel shadowed. You can't be the main protagonist without a white companion. If you hate this country so much, why stay in it? Take this knee and call it unpatriotic, call us scum. Tell me to go back to my country when this country is more mine than yours. Kaepernick got blacklisted and a cop gets repositioned. Takes a manhunt to bring a suspect in, only did something when we saw the footage. We can have a group of Nazis walk down these streets and receive no punishment, but fight for the lives of Black people and let the squads in. You want this skin, but not the condition. You want the show, but not the credits. You want my mouth, but won't take this medicine in your vocabulary. Injustice is called compromise, and justice is called special treatment. One voice to make it 3/5 of a person, because it will always be easier if you can make a Black person less than a man. And they wonder why we only rise in numbers. We are only seen as people when we are in groups. You hunted us down for centuries. You beat us. You lynched, you raped our women and children, and we asked you for equality, and they gave us bondage. Accept these conditions or fall victim. We want to live, but you want to finish what your ancestors started. You killed someone's son. You killed someone's daughter. You tell us to get over it after you wash off the blood, paint over our memorials, make us watch as you try to erase us. Word of advice. Show them that the inside of your palms are the same color as their skin. Don't do anything that will make them want to come in. They will cut you open to see if you bleed the melanin you are so proud of. My mother told me from a very young age that you must respect authorities. Never speak too loud. If a cop stops you, don't do anything to scare him. Look down and stay quiet. Do anything you can to make it home. Don't make a mother bury her child. Apologized for my flesh. Sorry that her loving a Black man gave me a death sentence. Be good and get home safe. One of my worst fears is bringing a beautiful Black boy into this world, that I will have to fill his bedtime stories with warnings and package his lunchbox with silence and submission. I will have to raise two different people, his Blackness and his image, that he will turn on the TV years from now and say, why do they kill us? I will tell him that he needs to love his pigment, and he will say that it makes him a target. I will try to show him how to love his hair, and he will say that it feels like rope, tastes like heritage. When the teacher asks him what he wants to be when he grows up, he will say old. That he will look at a textbook and see our murders, wondering when he will get his plot. I will have to tell him what my mother told me. They will see your skin as a weapon, your voice ammunition. Cover up, but keep your hood down. Hands up, don't make a sound. If you were too loud, they will kindly compare it to the sound of their bullet. Ask you, if Black people are so fast, why didn't they dodge it? Is this what they call family traditions? My culture was erased by privilege, and now it feels like the only thing I can pass down to my children is this noose, this gun, this knee, this barbed wire. Maybe one day you will stumble upon a story. A man with the name of Floyd, the marches that were held in his name, the air his people breathed for him. When we got tired of being polite, tired of being peaceful, when a protest became a murder technique, angrier about a Black man taking a knee against brutality than a white man taking a life. This is not just in Minneapolis, it is in our neighborhoods. One day I will look at my beautiful Black boy and pray that he makes it home, that he doesn't run into the law. I have found that I have come to fear cops more than burglars. We don't call to have the fire extinguished in case they call us the arsonist. How can you blame us? when time and time again you have proven that you will let us die. Ironic how a man who fought against gun violence died beneath a cop, suffocated on the irony when the cop proved to him that they could make any man disappear, that he would get his 15 minutes of fame from the grave. They thought we wouldn't fight for him, that we wouldn't take back the air they stole from him. We will not let him disappear. We will not let this son, this brother, this father, this human being fade away. Did you know? One of the last things that George Floyd did was cry out for his mother. Mama, he cried out as if maybe the woman that gave him life could have saved him, or maybe he called out for her because he knew he was going to die. Like a child seeking out his mother on a dark night, wanting comfort, but only feeling the concrete floor. Mama, help me. I can't breathe. He's going to kill me. Thank you.
Wow, so powerful, Kenya. Kenya, we know that this happened during the pandemic. What was your writing process for this poem, your emotions? Tell us about it. It must have been we were all in this collectively, it was very heavy on everyone's hearts. But like you said, and I know you always tell me when you were younger, as a Blaxxican person, tell me the writing process.
Yeah, I think a huge part of it was, I think when the whole incident happened and the video came out, a big thing that a lot of people did was just this gasp, like this horrendous like feeling of grief that hit all of us. And I feel like a big part of it is that, like, most of my life, it's always been that clash where it's like I identify to both sides, but this was the first time in my life where I'm like, when you see George Floyd, I was like, that looked like my father, that looked like my uncles, my cousins. We've had that before when we see people, but it was like the first time where it really hit me, like watching that video, and it's like you're gasping with him, like, are they going to stop? Are they ever going to stop? Am I allowed to just be alive and exist, in this place where our existence is already seen as a crime, And I think when it came to that, I wanted to do him justice in a way where it was like, this isn't just a man, this is our family, this is our family members. As a collective, especially where we are culturally, it is so big to what we are facing. It's like the lack of culture that we already have. And it's like the one thing that bonds us is the fact that we keep dying, that we have that monumental grief that was just transcends any conversation, where it's like you can walk into anyone, and if it's a Black brother or sister, you have that collective feeling. And I wanted to show that because a lot of the biggest issues is that we move on, so I kind of wanted to write something that said, how do we move on from this? And my biggest thing is I've always wanted to be a mother, and things are crazy and who knows if that will ever happen, but a big thing is relationships and being a mother. And that was huge because when you're watching that video, it was just like there was millions of mothers watching that video, millions of sons and daughters and family members who just watched someone just disappear, and it was just so quick. And so I think a lot of the time, and especially when it comes to my poetry, it has always been therapy. It has always been my way to discuss the things the only way I knew how. And a lot of people, I once spoke for a class, and this little girl said it best, and I always bring it up, where she says, "You make hard things sound pretty." And so that's always been my little thing, where I remember that this little 9-year-old was saying, "You make hard stuff sound pretty." And so that's what I try to do, because sometimes a lot of times it always feels like we're not listened to at all. And so especially as a woman of color, that you have to shout loud. And so I think I wanted to put into a piece what it felt like to be seen as such a small, insignificant thing, but filling the entire world, and from his death, we saw so much in the world change. It was like the first time that people were like, whoa, this is a big problem. Whereas the Black and brown community are like, we've been here and we've been dealing with it. This is the first time y'all are really like acting like you see it, So it was also that challenge where I really wanted to put into a piece what it felt like and translate it to someone who has never experienced it before. Because these are the things I live with. It is my Mexican mother telling her Black children, hey, like, you have to be 10 times as careful as your white counterpart. She's just like, especially as a woman, we are seeing the statistics when it comes to sexual assault, when it comes to police violence, all of these other things. There's constantly the intersectionality of dealing with something like this. So I really wanted to emphasize what it was for a son and for a brother and a father to call out to someone that was no longer here, you know. And I feel like that was such a huge piece, because it wasn't only, it was millions of people's stories. You know, there was millions of mothers. And I think that's the perspective where I had, because that was what hit me the most. It's like, how many of these people who died called out for their moms or their dads or God, you know? And it's just like, but it can be erased, as simple as that. One stop, it can be a counterfeit bill, it can be a traffic stop. And it's like, everything that you were and are is gone. And I really believe that I just wanted to do him justice in a way where it's like, this, above all else, it's not a hashtag, he was a person. And I'm really proud of how the piece turned out. And it is one of the most incredible pieces that I've had the privilege to write. It's just, most of the time I'm talking about really hard stuff, but at least I make it sound pretty.
Thank you so much. Where were you when you started writing it? Like, did you just get a journal, or did you get on your computer? Did you get it on your phone? Did you just record it? Tell me about that.
Yeah, I think I can actually specifically remember it because when it happened, everyone knows me kind of like for like the poetry, and I do like community organizing. So they were kind of like, how is she doing? And I was like, I'm writing. So that was a big part. And we were going to put a memorial together. And I was like, this is my first time where I was kind of going out. And I was like, this is my chance to actually talk about this in a way where it isn't just a specific narrative. It is coming from a Black woman who has been this space of Black Lives Matter when it comes to even being a mother, when it comes to being a Black person, you know. And I felt like that was my biggest chance. So I remember I just grabbed my notebook. I have like probably dozens of notebooks around here that I always keep around. And I just started writing, and I was just like, that was the only thing. And I feel like the way I've been able to process things that happen in my life is like that grief is putting it down on paper. It's making it real, you know. And for so long, the only way I can make things that happen to me real was to put it on paper, because this is definite. This is in existence. So I've always found so much power with it. So I just remember grabbing it or grabbing a journal, and I was like, let's go, like everything out. Because it just feels like, especially as being a Black person, it just feels like you hold everything in, because you don't want to be the person that brings up race or talks about these things, the angry Black woman, all these stereotypes you have to grow up with. And it's like, we aren't even allowed to mourn. Like, we're not even allowed to have grief or to be sad. We have to see a man get killed and go to work or school the next day. There is no end to the suffering, you know. So it was like the first time where I was like, I'm saying all I want to say that I've ever wanted to say when it comes to these things, and you're gonna listen, you know, because you're gonna listen, because no one listened to him say stop. And I feel like that's why I just grabbed the journal and I was like, let's go.
Yes, we have a question that says, can you please tell me how you managed activism during the pandemic?
Oh yeah, that was huge. I lost track of the amount of protests that I went to, and just a bunch of organizing. And it was a very big switch, because I started activism when I was in middle school, I think. So I was one of those young people that was at every event. No one knew who I was, but I was like, I'm going to be here and doing my thing. So I kind of grew up in the scene. So the way I knew activism when working with other people and organizations and programs, it was so different when you have to take that online, especially with social distancing, masks, stuff like that. Everyone's terrified. You know, they're like, we don't want to get COVID. We don't want to be sick. But it's like, we can't just sit here stuck in our houses and do nothing. So a big way that it shifted was making sure that everything was socially distanced, that we were still having events, but doing it the safest way possible. And so a lot of it was, sometimes we just had a truck, a mic, a stereo, and we were going down the streets. We were driving all throughout California. My whole summer was dedicated to that before I started my year at college. But I just remember it was just everyone just got on a phone call and they're like, okay, what are we doing? And so I got to do amazing stuff where we went to Martinez, California, and that was probably the biggest event that really hit me, where it kind of went viral, where they wrote the painted the mural for Black Lives Matter, and the white couple came and threw paint all over it. So we had we actually put together an event as like a callback to that and being like, no, we're still here. And we repainted it. We went, and it was just like the biggest thing because there was thousands of people, you know, and it was the first time where people were like, no matter what happens, we have to keep going. We have to continue the work. This can't stop us. And because silence is the violence, you know, and we can't allow, just because it's a pandemic, we can take the opportunities that we have now and do the best that we can. And so that was like the biggest shift, where it was like, how can we do this safely but still continue the work? And I'm glad that we found a way to do it. But it was extremely strange, and still is, because I still help with some of the community organizing here, and it's been a dynamic shift. We aren't living the same way we used to before, but that doesn't mean we stop working for each other. And that's what I also saw, was more people coming together than ever before. Because I started with the little 11-year-old that used to show up to protest and stuff, and they're like, where's this chick from, you know? And then now I'm 20, and they're like, oh, hey, yeah, it's Kenya. And they're like, if you're looking for someone, it's the big black girl over there. And I'm like, hey, you know? So it's like, I kind of saw the shift where it wasn't just me anymore and how I used to do it. It was like all these people who were just like me and passionate about the cause. We all found each other. And it's such a great environment where you're with people who understand the experience and are like, how do we help? And how do we help our community in a way that's going to change it forever? And I really think this summer gave me the opportunity to explore that.
Thank you. How was the response in Salinas, and in comparison to the other places where you went to march? Was, you know, in comparison to this, like Monterey County? I know you organized several events here in this area. Can you tell me a little bit more about it?
Yeah, I think it was different everywhere. One thing that like needs to be said, that when I'm asked this, I'm very brutally honest. There's a lot of anti-blackness in many communities, not just like here. And I'm not gonna play around and be like, oh no, everything was sunshine and daisies. No, we had a lot of racism backlash at us. We had Trump supporters showing up threatening to kill us. Like, it is not all fairy tales. People love to be on Instagram and let me do my one picture and go on with my day. But when you're really in the heart of it, you're putting your life on the line at every protest, because we had people running their cars through our protests where we were standing. I remember diving away. I had tear gas pointed at my head. Like, it was not a game, you know? And so I think where it differed was when you were going into big cities, there's more risk. That's the biggest way I can explain it. There's more risk. We were seeing more retaliation. We were seeing more violence. We were seeing more drawback, where a lot of people were like, who do you think you are being here and saying this? But it's like, if no one says it, it's going to continue to happen. So I'm going to be here all day, you know? And I think I also saw a lot of support in Salinas, but there were some people kind of, just when it comes to, especially being biracial, it can kind of be where I'm in the middle, where it's like, okay, well, I'm with the Black community right now, and I'm also with the Latinx community, but it's like, how do I get a balance where I can be that person even when I have Latinx people who are like, no, why do we even care about that? What about us? What about us? You know, and that was the constant question, especially in Salinas where I got it, where it was like, but we're primarily Latinx. Why should we care about this? Why should we care? And it's like, but we have a Black community that cares about you. So it's like that. It was kind of like that shift where I think that's where it differed, because depending on where the area was, it was either more dangerous or people just didn't understand. They're like, why are we talking about this? Why does it matter? And I think that's where the activism really comes in, because it's not only you marching, doing these things. It was education, it was programs, it was organizations. There's things I'm working on now that I started in the summer, you know, so it became this bigger identity thing where it was like, as a collective, once people got more educated, they're like, I understand and I stand with you. And that was a great shift that we saw in Salinas, because by having these workshops and programs and things like that, people are like, I understand now. Because a lot of it has always been stick with your own, do your thing. But it's like, we can't live that way when it's always us. You know, we're always at the bottom of the food chain. So let's come together, and if there's not a seat at the table, let's make one. And they always say, like, if there's not a seat at the table, go get one of those plastic chairs and shove it in and go get your seat. So I think I saw that shift where all of these people from every walk of life was like, this is not only a Black issue, this isn't only a brown issue. We're all in this together. And that's the biggest thing, that together we rise. So let's do it together.
Great. We have a comment from Dr. Vanessa Fernandez, who says, I love how you humanize and engage empathy by focusing motherhood and fatherhood. The metaphor of the knee is powerful. And she also has a question asking, what safety measures did you take during protest?
So a lot of it had to do is we have security. So we have organizations that do special security where it isn't police oriented, because we did see a lot of pushback from police, and that's like in general. That's if you're going to be discussing things, there's a big division between us trying to fight for something and be like, hey, don't kill us, and it's like, no, so it's like very we very much had to take safety measures, not only when it came to COVID, so making sure that we gave supplies to everyone, whether it be masks, shields, hand sanitizers, even separate sections where people would be if they were immune compromised. There was a lot of measures that were taken to make sure that we were safe. And I think the biggest thing is a lot of people were seeing these Black Lives Matter protests in the light of the Target being robbed, or these like small businesses. I never experienced any of that, but that's what they expected when I came in with my organizations, or when I came in with other programs. That's what they expected. So no one was like, no, we don't even want you here. We saw what you've been doing, but it's like, that's not what we do at all. And so that's the biggest thing, where it's like, okay, knowing that they're going to expect that, how do we make sure that this event is going to be safe? And it's like making sure that we have boundaries, that we had our security, we had anything that had to do with COVID, and making sure that we're as safe as possible, especially because some people brought their children to experience it, because we would have like workshops and play stuff. So it was like, it was an entire community and not just what they expected. And I think once they saw the kiddos and like moms with their strollers and stuff, they were like, whoa, this is so different. But we always made sure that every activity that we were doing was always safe.
And are you working on pandemic poetry?
Yeah, so I actually just finished a piece which is called Salas for my Salinas people, and that was my pandemic piece, but it was mostly for Salinas as a whole, because out of the entire county and basically the state, we were the most impacted. And especially because we are the salad bowl with our farm workers, and it felt like we feed the nation, and it's like, but we're forgotten, like no one knows we're here. So I actually wrote a piece called Salas, and that one was the one I submitted for the Poet Laureate, and I won. And so that was kind of talking about the history of Salinas and how we have always persevered through every storm, every war, everything that we've ever been hit with, we have persevered, and kind of how the pandemic is just another thing we'll get through, another thing, a part of history. And so I hope to continue on just talking about it, because we have seen that minorities are the ones being most affected by COVID, and it's something that needs to be discussed, especially how we can ensure that we help this community without being like, oh yeah, we see it, and then just turn away and start on the next issue. It's going to continue to happen if we don't do anything about it. So I do hope to do more pandemic pieces, but the most recent one was Salas.
Can you recite Salas for us?
Yeah, I can do it. Let me see.
Yes.
Let me get it on my computer. Yeah, I'm extremely proud of that piece. It's really, I think the biggest thing is I have generations of family members who are from Salinas, born and raised. And so it wasn't just my story, but it was everyone's story. So it always gets me a bit emotional, but I won't cry, but hopefully. But it's just something I'm extremely proud of. And it's kind of like not quirky, but I was very like loose with it, and it's like the history of Salinas, so Nara probably love it.
I cried, so you need to recite it.
I'm so sorry. Okay, so I actually have it right here. This one is called Salas. In my freshman year of college, I was a part of a history research project. Its goal was find out the history of Salinas and study its immigration patterns, paint a picture of how people immigrate to Salinas. Discover what led our people here. The seeds planted into the nation, the blossoming of leaves that tell one story, find what made Salas home. Sounds boring, but this project changed my life. In books and maps, I was able to discover my own history and the history of the place I call home, a story where all people of color worked in the fields, where dreamers and descendants of slaves worked hand in hand, Jim Crow South meeting Oaxaca blues, Chicanos and Filipinos sharing stories of a home they would probably never see again. People who grew the city that now feeds the nation. Something that hasn't changed is how they survived together. It didn't matter where you were from or who you had been. Salinas was a hotspot for hope, a destination for the first of their family, children who were told they could seize a better life if they reached out for it. People who left families behind in hopes that they could get their American dream. The people I met all had the same thing to say. The first place they came to when they migrated was Salinas. That was when I realized that there are whispers of our city all over the world. Like history has shown, we are a lighthouse in the distance calling lost men home, a chance to restart and renew, never to forget where you come from, but to settle somewhere greater. It is a home to the needy, and it is all I have ever known. This city reminds me of my grandmother, Abuelita, stories from the fields and the little pink church my family went to as children, Cardboard Hill, and my mother, a little girl too afraid to go down. Old Lane Creek, the running water long forgotten and hidden away beneath concrete, Williams to Ryder, a shortcut home. Best friends, neighborhood kids, and one street to call their own. Vicente Fernandez on the drive-in screen, carloads with secret passengers stowed away, waiting for the stars to come out. Daylight bringing the flea market with vendors, with churros and tamales and bootleg mixtapes, hoping one day they could be a star too. That is what community looked like. The smell of secret recipes and evening barbecues, a family that struggled, but they struggled together. Now they call it progress, and we are left to wonder, did we really progress? Old photographs, the only memento to know we were here. How strong our foundation is because we live here, but also a token of how much we have lost. Salinas knows sacrifice. A town memorial in the center of our city as a reminder from 107 World War II soldiers marching proudly down Main Street, laying their lives on patriotism, to only having 47 survivors return home from the March of Death in Bataan. Salinas also knows secrets, a hidden acknowledgement to the time we stood on the wrong side of history, North Main, a silent present to the Japanese brothers and sisters we kept in bondage. Our legacy is written. For every war, every harvest, every storm, we have stood as our people did before us, because even with sacrifice, there is always strength. Light when the dawn breaks, when the storms came in, we rebuilt, we forgave, we remembered why our grandparents first settled on this land. We remember that there have always been hardships and tests. Whether it was fighting for unions or better pay or the right to settle on the land we founded, Salinas has never been afraid of battle. I remember that my ancestors were enslaved and dreamers, that I am not the bounty taken after the war. I am a dream come true, that the city, like me, never stops fighting. That to being from Salinas means blood, it means fighting, it means beating our feet into the fields like the rhythms of Aztec dancers, not forgetting where we come from, the sacrifices that permitted our feet on this land. We have sacrificed everything for a country that hasn't always seen or wanted us. This past year has taken so much from us, but even though this pandemic has been hard, we have pushed harder. In the wake of mourning, we wiped our tears and walked again. We are a city of refugees taking their final step into freedom, a story spread over borders, one that proves that no matter where we are in the world, we always find each other. When there was no hope in sight, we relied on blessings, prayers, and a helping hand. In our worst, we came together and reminded ourselves of what makes Salinas home. Even after all this loss, we are reminded that we still have each other. Our streets, our neighborhoods, the person next door that always plays the music too loud, and the children that use broken pavements as playgrounds, hope in the most unlikable places, dreamers all around with aspirations so big you can almost touch them. Our city sings worship songs through the night and the drum beats of war, refusing to back down from any fight, and I know that we will not back down from this one. Veterans with legacies far longer than lifespans, kids from violence sitting in the back of their class with fire in their chest, soldiers on our streets with no homes to go to, first-generation students with Spanish-speaking parents still holding on to a dream generations built, farm worker parents fighting to make their children's dreams come to fruition, single mothers, and honor roll children always beating the odds. A Blaxxican girl with a big mouth and so much to say, hoping someone will hear it. The kind of people that Salinas has built. All around with stories of triumph, David beating Goliath, Dorothy finding her way back home, Salinas and the people who live here standing strong. No one can take this from us. Our roots, our stories, our dreams, new people will come with homes to match, and we will watch and remember that even through change, who we are. The secrets designated to the people who love and live here, the settlers to a land that has impacted the world but been forgotten. We won't forget. We will rise as we always do, how we always have, and we will begin again in our fields, our homes, our schools, in these streets, and with each other. From those books, those maps and stories, the roots that make this home, I learned that from our history, above all else it means, Salinas will persevere. We always have. Thank you. That one always makes me teary-eyed.
I mean, this hits home because I'm from Salinas.
I know.
And
it's like it hits different.
I know it's different, like because we know, and it's just that's why I got involved in Young Life, because I wanted to be a role model to a lot of middle schoolers and young kids, and you were there too. So I'm just like so proud.
And you were.
And it's just it's an impact. And we have a question from Dr. Vanessa Fernandez asking, where is your poem published?
Oh, so I have a website called kenyaburtonpoetry.com. I find it easier if it's just my name and in poetry. So if you want to find any of my pieces, they are on there. I love sharing them with everyone. So if you would like to see it, it's on kenyaburtonpoetry.com.
And that is posted on the chat for everyone's reference.
Cool.
So we have a couple of minutes. So just what does it mean to be the Salinas Poet Laureate as a Blaxxican queen?
That's so I feel like that has been the biggest question I've been getting. And I think to answer the question, I kind of need to tell you about me. So a big thing is that I'm born and raised here. So it's always been that dynamic where it's you're from Salinas, Salinas, and it's where is your place here, especially? And I think for me, I am a survivor of domestic violence. And so a big part of my story has been that survival and what it was like growing up in an abusive and toxic childhood. So my whole life was kind of, I was never like this, which is why everyone who knows me from a kid, they're like, whoa, you really changed. And I think my dad was always involved in music and singing and songs, so he always had this big old stack of notebooks in his house, and I would always be like, how do you have so much to say? How do you have so many notebooks? And so I remember him giving me a notebook, and he's like, just write lyrics down. And I'm a singer, so I've always wrote songs and stuff like that and lyrics, and so that became poetry. And just surviving that life with him and what it was like to have to keep secrets and to be too afraid that CPS will come if you report it, or even when it came to situations where I shouldn't even be alive today. And I think it hits me now that it's I spent so much time with that notebook and millions of notebooks just writing it down. And I was like, if no one is ever going to hear me say what is going on at home, my notebooks will. These lines will, it's evidence, it's in existence, even if I can't say it, my notebook knows what's happening. And so I don't know how it happened, but for years I always did that. I always carried a notebook around, or I had my little notes app and I would just write stuff down. And just when you grow from a situation like that, you feel like your words don't matter, that anything you do, it will never matter, because that's what the abuser does. They make you seem like your words are insignificant or that you're the problem. So little Kenya was like, no one's ever going to care what I talk about. This is mine. No one will care. And I think I got to a point where I ended up submitting a poem for my English class in 7th grade. And my teacher was like, this is really good stuff. And I'm like, really? You're lying. Of course I'm going to think myself's not that good. And she was like, they're having a poetry competition. She's like, if you're comfortable, I would really love you to go and do a poem. And so I got my guts together and I was like, Mom, let's go. We're going to Cesar Chavez Library and we're going to do a poem. And so here she comes in, my tiny little Mexican mom with her big old black kids. And we're like, hey, she's doing a poem. And so I ended up doing the poem and I won. And I was like, what? Like, what is this? And so I think that was like the first time where I was like, they're like, your words are amazing. Like, you need to continue. And I'm like, I think that was the first time that that little girl, like that little Kenya that like survived all that and was like, no one's ever going to listen to you. It doesn't matter, you know? And it was like the first time where they're like, whoa, like they actually listened, you know, for the first time in my life, I got to share my story and someone listened. And I think I've always felt like that little Kenya's inside of me. So it's been an emotional journey I competed all throughout high school. I was top ranked. I've gotten awards from New York for my writing, all throughout California. I've been a recipient in California for my awards for my background. And I just always think that there was a little girl who used to write in notebooks that her dad gave her and thought no one was ever going to listen to it, you know? So when it was announced that I got this, I think it was the first time, like as a Salinas kid, born and raised, I was like, whoa. Like, it was the first time where it was like, we saw you, we listened to your story, and we wanted to hear it, and it mattered. And so I think that above all else, I was like, I don't care about the title or anything, just the amazing response I got from my community, and them being like, we always saw you, your words are amazing, we see what you do. And it was like, that was never what I did it for, but I think that little girl who was like, no one will care, and I was like, yeah, they do, they really do, and it does matter, and what you say does matter. And just, I think it's also helped me to see younger girls who are like me, especially Black and brown girls, be like, I want to be like you when I grow up, and I want to speak like you do. And, you know, and it's just, I just remember being that little girl who was like, it's really shy and didn't think anyone would care. And it's like, they're like, we're going to be like you. And it's just so crazy to be, it's like full circle, like all things, like you being my mentor in middle school to going to now we're over here doing this stuff, you know, you never expect it. But I think that's why it hits so hard when I was announced, because it's like every step of the way it led me here, and I'm just super grateful for it. It really does mean the world to me and my family, because it's my story and it's that little girl being heard. So I'm just super grateful for the position.
And it's just amazing, like you said, you know, for everyone, like I mentioned before, I know Kenya since she was in middle school. You've always been so bubbly and you've always been super friendly and everybody like you. And now just the fact that we are both here, I'm now a mother and we're both here on this, sharing this space with important topics, you know, to make an impact in our communities. I think that's the best feeling ever. And we have a question from Dr. Fernandez.
Yeah, I just figured I'd raise my hand. Kenya, thank you for your beautiful participation in our conference today. I'm really, really impressed by your work and your message. We had an earlier presenter, and what resonates with me is that you have a lot in common, because you both described yourselves as these shy people who searched for your own healing and your own voices through, she's a singer-songwriter, and so she uses her words the same way you do. What's interesting to me is that I'd love for you to connect, but how these supposedly shy girls, it's hard to believe, right? Because you guys are so vocal and making such huge waves and progress, you know, for our communities. She's in Oakland and you're in Salinas. So I just wanted to thank you for your work and for overcoming the individual internal to help the rest of us, the collective, right, come together and be stronger, because your bravery gives us bravery, right? And for joining us today and making us a part of, guess your journey forward, perhaps we could say. And I have to go back to the metaphor of the knee, though, because that was amazing and so well done. And you should do a whole poem called The Knee, because that would be amazing. It was so eye-opening. I'm a literature professor. You have to excuse that. And the last thing I wanted to say was, I wanted, if you wouldn't mind commenting briefly for just a little more about the dual racial identity you described, are Latinx and Black, because I'm Puerto Rican, and so we were being Latinx and Black, even if you're pale skinned, is still part of just like who you are. And I didn't understand the division until I moved into the United States. where there is a division, but you know, in kindergarten, I'm learning that you are Taíno, Negro y Español, right? Y Europeo. So I was just wondering, because your experience was kind of surprising to me because I come from such a different experience. And I was wondering if you don't mind just sharing a little bit of that in light of your honor as poet laureate, right? Because you mentioned how there are two sides, but you're both. And you just, you know, you wrote about Salinas as the community. So I was wondering if you could just talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, just thank you so much. I'm all teary. I try not to cry. That really does mean a lot, especially because it is something I'm passionate about and it's something that I want to continue to do. I'm 20, so it's like, it's still mind-boggling that I've ever even made it to this point, because I never even, younger me was like, oh, you're just gonna do what you're gonna do, and I'm over here like, whoa, this is a lot more than I ever dreamed I could ever reach. So it means a lot to get compliments like that. But I think that is a huge thing, and I've had conversations, especially my friends who aren't originally from America, where that as soon as they come here, they're like, whoa, things are very decisive here, things are very divided in a way that it wouldn't be, you know. And I think as my experience, a lot of it was, even growing up, like I was either the negrita or they had no idea where to put me. You know, even some of my like friends' parents who are only Spanish speaking, they're like, oh, which friend are you bringing? They're like, oh, like the negrita, you know what I mean? So it's kind of like I've always had that kind of that wishy-washy where I'm like, okay, what do we call you? Because you can only either be black or brown. You can't be both, you know. But then I'm over here secretly, like I'm just like a secret agent in between that knew both worlds. You know, it's like I had my abuelita and I had the cookouts on Sundays, like, you know. So it's like that. It was so enriching to have both cultures, but it also came with a heavy toll with it, where I was a kid growing up, and I remember my earliest memory with racism. I went to like a Spanish speaking school, and I remember the kids not wanting to share crayons with me because they thought it would turn them into the unpleasant way to call a black person, right? And I was like 6, so I'm like, what's going on? Because it's like they look like my little cousins, they look like my nephews, my nieces. Like, what's so different about me, mom? Can you explain it to me? And so that is a hard conversation to have with a 6-year-old, where you have to explain that sometimes people in your own community won't want you, and that you're always going to be the outside little piece. And I have a piece that I ended up creating, and I think that's kind of how my poetry kind of evolutionized, because a lot of it was talking about that experience where it's like, how do I love both sides of me when neither of them accept me? Because I have to fill out other on every box when I fill out every document, because there's not a place for me here, because I can't be technically both. So that was like its own thing. And especially coming from like the Latin side, it was very much like, we don't do that. So sometimes even now I've gotten conversations where they're like, oh, but she's not pure blooded, so she's not really Mexican, or, oh, she's not really black if she's mixed, you know? So it's like that little wedge. But I think as I grew up, I kind of started understanding and finding other people like me. So my fellow Blasians and Blaxxicans, and we're such a melting pot. That's the thing, that we can't call America the melting pot and then distinguish anyone that doesn't look like you or sound like you. You know, I'm a big advocate for all this stuff. And so it's been finding other people who are like me, and also people who are like, why label yourself? You know, I call myself Blaxxican. That is what I am and will always be. And it's something that I'm extremely proud of. And it's had its own barriers, but it's never made me love myself any less. And I think it took growing up and learning about myself, especially like my hair and the way I looked and my features, and like, I look like my mom, but I look like my dad. And it's like, okay, how does this work? You know, so I think also growing up, I think when you're a child, you don't really understand the barriers until you get older and you're like, I get it, I understand now. So I think that's why I find it so important, because now with my work, I work with other little brown and mixed girls, and it's so interesting to be like, you know what, you're beautiful, your hair looks great, you know, you're here, you deserve to be here. And it's like, I get to give back to the same little girls that were like, what box do I fill? Like, where do I go? I'm other, where do I go? But I think it's about finding the right people. And I think also the education of it. There are so many amazing books and things out there that talk about that experience, especially being an African American, you know, like I have a friend who's Black and Mexican, but her family is originated in Nairobi. So it's like she's actually from Africa. And when she comes here, it's like, what is going on? And I'm like, I have no idea either. Like, let's hang, you know? So it's like, it's a very interesting thing, but it's something that I cherish the most about myself because I've been a part of coalitions like the Black and Brown Coalition or Abolish ICE or Black Lives Matter. And I am able, sometimes I'm the only brown or Black person in the room. So it's like I have the experience of two very diverse but similar backgrounds where it's like, I understand what's here. I'm at the forefront. What can we do to help? And so I think it's just over time, you learn to love the things about yourself that people call different. But it's like, it's only called different and strange because they don't know it. But it doesn't make you any less beautiful or amazing. And so I think hone the things that make you different or strange to people because they usually end up being the most enriching and amazing parts of you. So I really loved your compliment and your question because just, it's amazing to hear that kind of feedback. So thank you.
Thank you so much. I'll turn it over to Brian now.
I think we lost Brian.
Thank you so much, Kenya. It was a true honor to have you in our conference. Your words are a powerful force that will help to change the world. I am sure about that.